Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to is it fifth or sixth installment of our MPF webinar series responding to the coronavirus pandemic. And joining us today, my partner in crime, Murray Gutfreund from New Jersey, and we've got Sherry Cushman from Cushman and Wakefield, Morris Tabish from the Tabush Group. We'll introduce each of them briefly here, and let me get to the right keys and get rolling. So Uri, why don't you say hello and
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Glad to be here. This is exciting, an important program. We have certainly great people to address these topics. You all know John Remsen. John is the president of the Remsen Group and the president and CEO and founder of the Managing Partner Forum. For those of you who have not been yet to this event, this is the annual event to be at. Unfortunately, it was postponed, right, John, from May.
Not canceled, postponed.
And it will be at the end of September with God's help, and we're very excited and looking forward to it. John is best known for his advice to law firm strategic planning, retreats, all the good stuff that make your firm really excel. So, John, take it away. So glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Well, Uri, thank you. And I have Uri say those things because I couldn't say them with a straight face. So, Uri, thank you for that nice welcome, and good to be with everyone. We had today about 100 or 211 registrants, firms of all sizes, from little guys up to some of the big law firms. And we've been averaging 150, maybe 200 participants at these forums. Will be recorded today, and we'll make available the recording and a nice set of handout materials. We'll send you a follow-up email. All of this will be archived on our website as well. So this is good material to share with your executive committees, your equity partners. Folks love the benchmarking data, so we've incorporated a nice set of data for you to share as to how firms like yours are responding to this unprecedented situation. Uri Gutfreund, most of you know, and now I will say good things about him that he can't say about himself. But I have been an admirer of Uri's work for many, many years. We met on the speaking circuit. I believe it was Toronto, Canada, at an ALA national conference. And he sat on my session and heckled me, and I sat in on his session and was very well behaved. But anyway, we've become friends. He runs a managing partner summit in New York, and as well as in New Jersey. And just last week, we assembled a virtual managing partner summit. I had about 100 managing partners of mid-sized New York firms on a 2-hour webinar. Morris, you were on that, and we repeated the same program in New Jersey the following day. So Uri's up there doing very similar things as we are on kind of the national level, concentrating in that New York, New Jersey region. And for a living, Uri is the national law firm practice leader at Risk Strategies Company. So he's selling insurance and risk management services to law firms around the country. So Uri, always good to be with you, and thank you for helping me out today.
Sure.
As well, Sherry Cushman. And Sherry and I have known each other for a while, and she's been involved in our managing partner conferences. And when it came to Office of the Future, Sherry Cushman's the first person I thought of, and she was kind enough to immediately say, yes, I'll join you today. Sherry is the vice chairman of Cushman and Wakefield and leads their legal sector advisory group. Some 400 professionals from around the world focused on law firms and their office space needs. Selection, site selection, lease negotiation, these sorts of things. Sherry is a big supporter of women's initiatives, and also on the speaking circuit, ALA, ABA, the International Bar Association, other organizations. Sherry, glad you're with us. Did I miss anything?
No, thanks, John. I'm really happy to be here with everyone today.
Well, and we're glad you're able to join us from Sarasota. So great to have you with us. And certainly not least, but last, is my friend Morris Tabish. And when I thought of technology, Morris was the first person to come to mind. His firm, based in New York, is called the Tabush Group. and they work with law firms, professional services firms all over the country on IT. And I think Morris is a proponent of finding your way to the cloud, and we'll talk about technology and how we build an infrastructure to support tomorrow's law firm, which might look a little different than it did just 3 or 4 months ago. Morris as well on the speaking circuit, and Morris and Uri, it turns out, went to the same college, grew up in the same neighborhoods, but didn't know each other until recently.
Well, one of us is older than the other. We're not gonna have to figure out who it is. You'll have to just guess.
It took
My
John.
money's on. I'm gonna take that bait.
I'm not going there.
And it took John in Atlanta to introduce us to each other.
Yes.
That's funny. And they're both working with law firms in the legal industry in New York. And yeah, it came through the Managing Partner Forum that they've become friends and seem to be doing a lot of stuff together. So great to have you guys with us. And this is a very timely topic. We really tune into managing partners, what they're interested in. So we've been doing programming on PPP loan forgiveness, maintaining productivity, working from home. The library of these webinars is on our website, and the handout materials as well. So we're really tuning into managing partners, what you're interested in, and trying to bring it back to you. At the conclusion of today's session, you will be directed to a brief survey, just 4 questions. Tell us what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like, how we can make these better. And we tune into that and try our best to bring it back to you. We've been presenting these MPF webinars every other Wednesday, 2 o'clock the afternoon, Eastern time, and getting just remarkable attendance. We'll get through our opening remarks. I want to share some survey data that we picked up from prior programs like this. And we got some polling questions for our audience today, now numbering at 159. According to the little dashboard I'm looking at. Then we're going to invite Sherry and Morris to share with us at that 30,000-foot level what they're seeing going on within real estate and office space, technology, and what advice they would dispense to managing partners of mid-sized firms. Practical guidance as to what you should be thinking about both in the short and long term. What this COVID-19 situation is doing to us, and how we can find that silver lining and maybe make some good things happen as a result of this. Last presentation we had the Winston Churchill, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And much of this pandemic is forcing change upon law firms that are a little slow to change at times. So Morris and Sherry are going to talk to us a little bit about that. We're going to go into a bit of a facilitated conversation. I've asked Uri to take the lead. There's a chat feature within your console for the webinar, and Uri's going to be mining that and presenting some of your questions to our panel, and then we'll wrap things up. Our next program is going to be about maintaining firm culture in a post-COVID-19 world, and we've invited Terry Eisner from Jaffe to be among our speakers. That'll be on June 9th, more information to follow. So with that, let's first introduce our first polling question, and bear with me, folks, I'm trying to learn this stuff. And first question, how many lawyers at your firm? Just to give our speakers a sense of our crowd with us today. And I'm seeing the results coming in. And we've got a good balance in terms of firm sizes represented here. About half of you have voted so far. And we're going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. About 2/3 of you have voted. And here's what we gather in terms of firm sizes represented today. Uri, is that result up?
Wow.
Yeah, we see the results, and as you said, it is pretty diverse. I mean, you're talking
No kidding.
just pretty much every single category. Wow. Okay.
Nice, even there. And
We're the
5%.
5%.
That NA is for the other real estate brokers on the line and the other risk management companies on the line who aren't law firms. So we appreciate your participation in that initial question. We're going to sprinkle a few more questions through today's session. But Sherry, Morris, kind of keep that in mind who we're talking to. Why do we want to get back to the office? And we asked this question about a month ago when we were doing a session with Dr. Sharon Abrahams on maintaining productivity when you work at home. And there's a widely held perception, there's 120 managing partners weighing in, that people goof off when they work at home. We're losing productivity. In many situations, 25%, 15% or more. And so we got to get folks back in the office so we can regain our productivity. I don't agree with that. I think some people are very productive, even more productive at home, but it's not for everybody. Can your firm accommodate both? What's the reason for this lost productivity? Here's what the 120 managing partners had to say. Too much going on. We got the dogs and the kids and the TV and the laundry. No structure, no accountability. Our people don't have the equipment to work well at home. This is all stuff you can fix, I think, as a firm by getting people well equipped, focused when they work at home, if they so choose that option.
John?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
John, you know, it's interesting. You made the good point that this is perceived by managing partners.
Perception.
So there's two issues. One is the lack of productivity, and one is really a separate issue, the perception of lack of productivity. Now, in the library, we did, I guess it was 3 webinars ago, we did a program with one of our consultants, Sharon Abrahams, about improving productivity, right? And working from home, and she gave some great skills on that. I think that maybe today's program will hit a lot more on the technology in improving what you know people are doing, won't it?
Well, we'll see. We're gonna share. I think Sherry and Morris both have some ways to try to keep an eye on productivity when folks do work remotely, and it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. So
Definitely not.
All this, I wish we could cover it in all an hour. We'll do our best. How about that return to office plan? This was our last webinar where we talked a little bit about this topic, and more firms have got that return to office plan in play. It varies by region of the country. I talked to a managing partner down in Albany, Georgia earlier this morning. They never closed. And their biggest client was Phoebe Hospital, which was early on a hot spot in this rural community in Southwest Georgia. And yet their office never closed. New York, Uri, it's a slightly different story, is it not?
Absolutely different story. You know, when we polled at our program last week, John, in New York, the numbers were way less. I mean, people are really just starting to conceptualize it. Firms have shared with us their plan is we're going to talk about it in 2 months. I know Sherry will have comments on that, but it's a different world, John, in New York.
Well, and we've heard what's the rush to get back to the office.
Right.
Kind of settled in. People are managing to pull it off, and until things are safe and healthy, what's the rush to return to the office? You know, some firms, we talked about this last time, Uri, people can't wait to get back to the office. They love being around one another and collaborating and such. Other firms, not so much. I like my distance from my colleagues. No one size fits all. Long-term impact, we asked this 2 weeks ago. 270 of you see an acceleration of long-term trends. And I think Sherry and Morris today will reinforce that when it comes to downsizing our footprint and embracing technology and flex time arrangements. Much of the pushback was from senior lawyers who are old school in thinking, but this pandemic is forcing us to kind of address some of that issues. I'm hearing some feedback on somebody's mic there among our faculty, not sure, but hearing a little bit of feedback. Our next polling question, and this is to set up Sherry, who will now talk to us for a spell. about what's going on in terms of office space, what managing partners should be thinking about. Let me go to, before we ask Sherry to talk, to answer a question for us. And that is, what do you think will be the long-term impact on our need for office space as a result of the coronavirus pandemic? We're going to need a hell of a lot less space, somewhat less space, about the same. Maybe there's a handful of firms that see the need for more space coming out of this to socially distance when we're in the office, or, I'm really not sure. So about half of you have voted so far. Uri, why don't you kind of lead us into Sherry's segment here?
Sure.
And I'll give this a few more seconds. We'll close it out and share our results.
Sure. Sherry, we're going to ask you in a second to project. Hopefully we'll time this right before John shows that data. Sherry, you're certainly well qualified to address this topic. You and your team of over 400 advisors to law firms all around the country. And we're really looking forward to hearing from you and what you've been seeing already and what you're projecting will be towards the future. So Sherry, John,
Sure.
we don't have our slide up. Hang on.
I'm ready to do the reveal, Sherry.
Okay.
All
Sherry,
right.
what do you think? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think most people will say not sure because they're not sure. My personal prediction is 25% or more.
Okay. John, show it.
I should have been a game show host, right?
There you go.
There we go. Half, 54%, see a less 5 to 25%, and 20% see a real substantial decrease in the amount of office space that they need.
I think it's amazing that 0% said more. 0, not even 1.
Yeah.
Sherry, take us away.
All right, well, let's get started. First, by all means, if anyone has a question, a challenge, anything, feel free to scoot in a chat message. And I know Uri is looking at the messages as well. So my focus today is not only about returning to the workplace, but planning for the unknown. And I will tell you that every Monday at 2 o'clock, I have about 150 to 200 of my top brokers that represent law firms all around North America. And the feedback that we're getting in the last 10 weeks has transitioned dramatically from just 10 weeks ago. So I want to first do a little walk down memory lane just in the last 10 weeks of what we've seen and the key areas of transition that are outside the 6 key things that I'm sharing here. So 10 weeks ago when we had our first call, law firms immediately ran to their lease and they said, let's look at our lease clauses. Let's look at everything that's going on in our lease. Do we have anything in our lease that is covering a pandemic like COVID-19? And the majority found that there wasn't. It wasn't something that anybody planned for and anticipated. Second of all, if there was ever a time in the legal sector for a pandemic and a financial crisis to occur, the first 2 quarters of a year are the worst. We all know, you all know how your business operates and how year end is all about getting money in the door, and the first and second quarters are to distribute those funds to the partners. So all of a sudden now we have this massive situation, and the first thing people are wanting to say is, do I not have to pay rent on square footage I'm not occupying? Cash preservation was king. And we really began to see on a very limited basis firms asking for rent relief. And this is in all markets across the country. What was interesting also is that Citigroup noted in those first 2 weeks that there was a 6-fold increase in lines of credit being either activated or being requested for firms to really prepare themselves through this cash crunch. So what was interesting as the weeks passed was we began to see very small things that firms were reacting to. Preliminary pay cuts, early pay layoffs, partnership distributions being stopped, some rent forgiveness. Mostly we were seeing it where landlords would forgive a law firm, but ask them to pay it back by year end with no interest. So all of a sudden we're beginning, this is week 2, week 3. But now lawyers are a month in to working remotely. And what we began to see in weeks 4 to 6 was a comfort level. And we're hearing this from law firms, large and small, big law included, that attorneys, and what makes you all really good attorneys, more than likely, you have characteristics of pessimism and you have characteristics of not liking change. And I've been doing this for 35 years. And what's interesting is when we talk about workplace and when we talk about technology and workplace shifts, historically, there's been a massive resistance for people to do any of these workplace shifts and strategies that their clients in corporate America and other businesses have been doing for years successfully, including the Big 4 consulting firms. So when you begin to start looking at all these things, about 5 weeks in, 6 weeks in, we started to hear from our clients all around the globe that traditional old school lawyers that never in a million years thought at the beginning of this year that concepts like hoteling, remote working, full or partial, would ever be something that they or their firm would do. But they began to get more comfortable with it. When technology was more reliable, they were getting time back, they weren't commuting, and they were using technology like we're using today to be able to connect and stay focused. So as the weeks progressed, we started, unfortunately, around week 6 to see huge layoffs, furloughs, pay cuts, and the beginning of leaders of law firms looking at all of their people and saying, do all my paralegals need to come back to the office? Looking at firm-wide services and saying, do I need my accounting people, my marketing people, do these HR people, do they need to be in the office every single day? And when you start to look at what a desk cost is, and when you start to look, depending upon markets, and I think this is really, really important, I'm not making a blanket statement, tertiary markets are having a much easier time recovering than what I'll call vertical markets. So as Uri and Morris both mentioned, New York City's got a long, long, long way before people start returning. So the first factor that I'm listing here is the legal sector will be one of the slowest industries to return, period. When they do, we look at it occurring in 2 phases. Phase 1, which we're calling between now and the end of 2020, and phase 2, which is everything starting in 2021. And phase 1 is really more of a beta test. It's to see how people are returning. Will they return? Getting your spaces ready for return, and then really taking a look at vertical city impacts and concerns. If you're in a primary high vertical market, you will not be able to be returning as quickly than, say, a market that the tallest building is 8 stories. You're not gonna believe this, but my golden retriever is like pounding me.
Want some attention?
I apologize, Sammy, lie down.
We're all getting to know each. I have a client that bought branded dog biscuits to send to clients as they have their teleconferences and meet the pets.
Yeah, I mean, I have been working all day and she hasn't done this, and then all of a sudden she does. But anyway.
Of course, I'm waiting for the leaf blowers to fire up in my backyard any minute now.
So if you're sitting in vertical markets, you got a very different logistical ball game, because there's a combination of psyche behind this, whether it's wanting to get on public transportation, subways, buses, driving to the train station. Then when you approach your building, is your building been prepared? How are you going to get 100,000 people up into 6 elevators that used to be 20, 30 at a time, that now will be 2 at a time? Markets where bicycling might be increased as well. Where are you going to put the bikes? I mean, the logistics behind this is something that people really haven't truly thought through. And it is mostly in larger markets, not our top 10 necessarily, but larger markets.
Sherry, this has often been called the forced experiment.
Yes.
Have firms been testing this in the past?
Some have. And John has talked at his managing partner forums. There are firms that are working 100% remotely, but absolutely, firms have been playing with some of these hoteling concepts, more remote working concepts. But I think personally, having been doing this for so long, this is a correction that this industry needed. And in the last couple of years, we've seen speed of change, primarily due to client demands, and Morris will talk more about technology demands. They want more, they want to pay you less. And then we've got this other little thing happening, which is the millennials taking over the world. By 2025, 52% of the US prime workforce will be millennials. And when you look at some of these major law firm moves, and I'm going to use big names just for the sake of using them, I mean, Skadden in New York, when they made a commitment 5 years ago to be the first into Hudson Yards, everybody laughed at them. They said, there's no way, anybody's going to go to Hudson Yards. 3 million square feet of law firm relocations later, with firms like Milbank, Cravath, Debevoise, Boyce Schiller, Cooley. Who would have ever thought that this would happen? Why is it happening? Because firms are reinventing themselves. And if your real estate does not allow you to reinvent yourself, that's why people are going. And statistically in 2019, this is really important for all the listeners, because that question that you said, how much square footage will be reduced, and most people fell in that 20-25%, some said more. What's really interesting is that in 2019, 54% of law firms in the major 10 markets in the United States relocated, made commitments to relocate last year. We have never seen stats like that. Typically it's 60-70% renew and a smaller quantity relocate. Well, why? Because their real estate got antiquated and they were no longer able to accomplish what they wanted to in their current real estate. The fleet equality, new construction. Look at San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, it's a perfect example. So this is the trend that we were seeing happening. And when law firms did move last year, on average, they dropped 29% of their square footage. So their face rate may have been higher, their per square foot, but their per attorney seat costs actually went down because they were dropping so much square footage. So this is a
what's the average square feet per lawyer, generally speaking, right now?
Our big national survey that we do every year that has about 700 law firms participate. On national average and you have two ratios, at head count, which is simply the number of attorneys you have divided into your square footage, or capacity, which includes all your vacancy rates. So last year it was hovering around 810 square feet per attorney at head count, about 680 at capacity, with average vacancy rates dropping over the last 5 years from 23% to 14%. So lawyers are dumping excess space. Real estate is your number one fixed expense other than salaries. So to have vacant seats that are non-revenue generating is crazy.
Yes,
so target ratios for the last year, if you're out looking for space, have been under 600 square feet per attorney. Now, that said, the legal sector still occupies 2 to 3 times what any other industry does on a per employee basis. So when you look at 300 to 400 square feet per employee on average in law firms, but you look at tech companies, insurance companies, the banking industry, Bloomberg in New York City is at 95 square feet per attorney. So the good news is that the legal sector has the real estate now to return faster than most people, because you almost hit the 6-foot rule in every single employee, whether your attorneys on the perimeter or your legal assistants. Only a smaller percentage of your people actually are sitting in what the tech companies or insurance companies are doing. So when you look at that, I think that we absolutely are going to see a continued densification. And I think that if you look at these 7 factors, the first is going to be willful return. In the next 7 months, law firms will see who will willfully return once they open their doors. There will be people that the doors are open that will say, I'm not coming back, whether it's for personal reasons, health reasons, high risk reasons, or quite frankly, They vaccine, if I was on a call this morning with a bunch of New York landlords, they said if a vaccine miraculously was found tomorrow, do you think people will come back more quickly? I said yes, but there isn't a vaccine tomorrow, and even by year end, all the healthcare companies are saying the most they can produce is 100 million vaccinations. Well, that's not going to help us. So willful return is going to be key. And so this phase one is going to be figuring out who's really going to come back, but more importantly is the determined return. We are seeing already law firms looking at every person within their organization and whether or not they truly physically need to be back in the office. Is it full-time? Is it part-time? We're working with one law firm that's in New York, at large office in DC, that's already announced internally to their paralegals that none of them will be returning. I'll be working remotely. So the other factor too is on client services. Firms are really looking very closely at client demands, their practice. Some, if you're bankruptcy, life sciences, litigation, healthcare, you're loving life right now. If you're not, you're looking very closely at those practice groups and also who needs to return. And then lastly, on this line is the expanded technology, which Morris will talk more about. 100% of the firms right now are spending more money on technology and will continue to in the future. So the challenge.
Sherry, you've been saying for years that if
5 years
technology
I've been saying this, yep.
has not already surpassed rent as your number 2 expense item, it soon will. This is just rocket fuel.
That's right.
Trend.
That's right. And so that is not going to change. Client demands aren't going to change. That you need to expand technology. And if more of this flexible workplace, which by the way, it doesn't say bricks and mortar is going away. It is going to be used very, very differently moving forward. We're also seeing firms, large and small, giving financial incentives. Can you just go back real quickly and then I'll close with this page, is offering financial incentives. And for any of you that are New York City firms, when you look at the taxes that an individual pays, whether you are a partner at a law firm or you are an employee at a law firm, it's somewhere between 10 and 12% to give you the privilege to work in New York City. Every week that passes, we are hearing that lawyers are looking at, I've already clocked in 60 plus days. I can probably clock in another 40 to 50 before I return to the office in the fall. And I'm going to I can work 2 days a week going into the city. And by the way, I can now keep 10 to 12% of that income because I've fallen within the 180-day mark. Now, you're an employee making $70,000 a year and you're spending $9,000 commuting, and your company incents you to not come back to the office. Here's $5,000 a year. Here's a $1,000 technology budget, a $1,500 furniture budget, and all of a sudden you bumped your income up by 35%. So all of these things are being looked at market by market, firm by firm, and we believe that between now and the end of the year, firms are going to balance and figure out what's right for them. But we are absolutely going to see a shift. I hear all the time, well, what about keeping culture, keeping mentorship? The younger people really want that mentorship. You can have that, but I would challenge anybody that do you need to do it 10 hours a day, Monday through Friday? Or can you beef up the times when people are in the office where you're having that better cultural experience and that mentorship? How many times do you not see your fellow colleagues all but a week or two apart if you're on different floors or hunkered down in a closed door? So the long-term impact, you can go to the next slide, please, John. Any questions from anyone, Ori, or are people just listening?
We have people, I think, mostly listening. Sherry, you've been covering a lot. I think that question I've already brought to you, which is, is this an experiment or is this permanent? But please go on.
Yeah, I think that the shift began around 6 weeks in. That's when we started to hear from law firms all around the globe and COOs, managing partners, heads of real estate say the 6-week mark seemed to be the mark where people started to become much more comfortable with it and could imagine some shift of a workplace. So as I mentioned, phase one will tell us who will return and how. Some of that will actually be decided by the law firms themselves. Others, it will be decided for them. Phase 2 will help us decide what that new workplace will look like. But we are anticipating, and I personally can say that I had 17 law firm transactions when we went into COVID. Every single one of them got changed or died. Firms that were in the midst of looking at relocating said, I'm going to stay, extend my lease for a year or two. Firms that were going to build a new building, they didn't get their financing and said, let's sit tight. Firms that were about to renew their lease for 10 years and do a renovation said, let's renew it for 2 years and not renovate. Let's preserve capital. So everybody's buying time, which is smart. It's smart to do that because between now and the end of the year, you're going to learn more than you ever thought you'd learn in the last 10 weeks. So we are anticipating that calendar year 21 and 22 is going to create tremendous opportunities for firms to complete restructures, renewals, and givebacks, create new workplace models that they've been testing during the course of 2020. We are anticipating that market by market, for example, in New York, with vacancy rates rising and real estate costs decreasing, and we think there's a 3 to 5 year recovery in New York City alone, that there will be windows of opportunity in markets all around the country, again, case by case, where you can actually take advantage of being in a tenant's market, regardless of the lease term that you have remaining. I think we're going to see a lot of firms that might have 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7 years remaining on their lease. Landlords are going to be very worried about getting space back. And so they may very well be happy to take back 20, 30% of your space with enough time to release it versus losing you and having a big hole. So I really do think that the timing works well with people seeing how things play out through the end of the year and then beginning to implement serious real estate and technology plans to go into 2021. And in closing, for my portion, we just came off of 3 of the largest M&A years in the history of the legal sector. There were over 500 mergers in between 17, 18, and 19. Over 50 of them had a global impact. So there's definitely the globalization of law. We are going to also continue to see attorney departures. For many years, the number 1 reason was to go in-house counsel. All companies are expanding their in-house counsel capabilities, so I think there's going to be more people fleeing traditional law firms to go in-house. We're also going to see, unfortunately, some dissolutions. Yeah. The one thing that came out last week was that big law spinoffs, where because of corporate demands to decrease legal spend, they're not only going to bring new attorneys in-house, but they're also going to be challenging big law to bring costs down. And there will be partners, groups of partners, associates that will spin off these boutique firms and go and approach their big clients and say, hey, Exxon or Amex or whatever, I can do it better in a boutique format, for 60 cents on the dollar. So we're going to see all sorts of hopscotching around, and I think it's going to present a really creative opportunity. And I will tell you that I know we have some over 100 attorney firms on this call, but I personally believe, and I've said this at other managing partner events, is that I believe that the boutique smaller firms have the ability to be as nimble and to change as much as you want to. And it's whether or not you can get there and you can get out of your own way to change. But this is an opportunity to reinvent yourself. This is a chance to reinvent how you service your clients, how you utilize technology, how you train your people, and how you put your firm in a position that will better place you to compete for the next decade or two. You can either grasp it, or you can let the world affect you, or take the bull by the horns and make it happen. I think it's a very exciting time in the legal sector. I've been doing this for 35 years, and I never in a million years thought we'd be sitting here today having this conversation. So I actually think it's very exciting.
It is exciting, and there will be winners and losers. And
there will be.
We want to make sure everybody on this call takes this in, thinks strategically, and emerges as a winner. This is going to catapult firms forward. if you do this right. Going back to the old way we always did things, not the direction you want to be heading. Sherry, thank you so much. We're
My
going to
pleasure,
turn
John.
over
Thank you.
to Morris, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions, answers. Uri's mining the chat.
Mhm.
So if you have some questions for Sherry, Morris, type them all in. We'll get to them at the end. We may run a bit long today. I want to give Morris ample opportunity to share with us where he sees technology going. And as we set up for Morris, let me do our polling question. And Morris, as people are putting their answers in, please vote where you see your technology going, budget going in the wake of COVID. Morris, why don't you get us started here, and we'll share the results in a moment or two.
Sure. So thanks, John. So, you mentioned earlier how Uri and I went to the same school, and I'll admit I was never the greatest student in school, and my parents used to always tell me, you've got your head in the clouds, and I turn to them and I say, yes, I still have my head in the clouds. You were right then, and you are still right. It's a different cloud, but that is where my head is. And
Morris, 3, 2, 1, everybody vote. What's your projection on where folks are going with their investments in technology going
my projection
forward?
is B, somewhat more, 5 to 25.
Ding,
Let's
ding, 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 ding. I should have been a game show
Oh,
host.
yeah.
Boy, nobody's cutting back. Nobody's staying the same. There is a recognition that technology is going to perhaps surpass rent as our number 2 expense item.
Well,
Morris, back to you.
If only I could play the market this good. So, it's interesting, Sherry, you said how when this whole thing broke, your clients were all coming to you, or law firms were really looking at their leases and saying, hey, can we get out of this? What our clients were coming to us with was a slightly different challenge. So let's say the week leading up to everything, March, I think it was the week of March 9th, I'd say our clients fit into 2 buckets. We've got our purely cloud clients, and we've got what I call the legacy clients that still operate the traditional way with servers and desktops and a way to do remote access. And those legacy clients were all in panic mode. And really what their challenges were, how is everybody going to work remote? We don't know what's going to happen if we're going to close. And for those clients, we were in sort of guerrilla mode, just trying to figure out what can we do. We'll deploy this system for them and this system, that what can we get up and running in the next few days? Whereas our cloud clients were a little concerned because of course it's a big cultural change, but really their only concerns were, okay, when everybody works from home, do they have everything they need at home to work? Whereas the former group had that concern, plus what are they even going to connect into?
Morris,
yes,
for those of your clients who are in this tech scramble in March, some of them were trying to expand their remote, right? Not just their hardware, it was also their remote access.
Exactly. And the way that they used to think about IT, and that too many firms still think about IT, is these are our systems, this is how we work, and then this is how we remotely access them. And I mean, this pandemic has changed so many things. It has underscored so many needs that we've sort of had in the back of our minds for a while. But one of the biggest changes is IT supports and defines operations for a firm. It is intrinsic to everything a firm does. I've been saying this disaster, this pandemic is very different than all the other ones we've faced. We faced 9/11, we faced Hurricane Sandy, we faced all the different tornadoes and hurricanes and natural disasters. This is different in so many ways, but mainly I would say that today in 2020, law firms are doing much more on screen or in the digital world than they ever were before. And things are only keep moving in that direction. So technology is so much more important than it ever was. And today and going forward, IT is no longer going to be, these are our systems, and then this is how we work remotely. It's going to just be, this is how we work. And like Sherry is saying, where you are will no longer matter. It can no longer matter. And Citibank, interestingly enough, in the beginning told everybody, okay, we've got Citrix. Everybody's going to work on Citrix. And within a day, they realized, wait a minute, their system can't handle all of their employees at once. And they actually went to assign people shifts of when they can be logged in. Another interesting one, JP Morgan Chase has got this multi-million-dollar phone conferencing system from a very big vendor that everybody here has heard of. And within a few days, they said to their employees, forget it, just use Zoom. So this is a different disaster than we've ever faced before. And so the first week was preparing. The next week or two was getting everybody, supporting everybody setting up from home. This one doesn't have good Wi-Fi. This one can't get their printer working, figuring all of that out. And then the third week, we had a very interesting story happen. One of our clients who was in the, they were using LogMeIn. Again, they didn't have a robust remote access system. So they had about 200 employees set up with LogMeIn, called us one Thursday and said, hey, we think there might be a problem. Random users are reporting weird things happening on their computers when they're working remotely. And then the next day, Friday, we got more and more calls about that, till we finally got a call from one of their IT people, said something is definitely wrong. My computer is doing all sorts of things on its own. We went into DEFCON 5 mode for the client. We didn't know, is it the Russians? Is it the Chinese? Who's hacking them? What's going on? And as we were investigating, a minute or two or a few minutes later, the IT person called me back, said, stop everything. We solved it. It's not the Russians. It's not the Chinese. He pulled up the video feed from their internal cameras. It was Carmen, the cleaning lady, walking around and wiping down everybody's keyboard and mice while they were while the office was empty. So that was it. We breathed a big sigh of relief. But what that taught us is that everything has to change. And the Citrix or the remote desktop or the LogMeIn systems that firms had in place and may still have in place for the occasional remote work are no longer going to cut it. So some of the technology that firms are, thinking about that had to support this new normal, first I'll just go through my list: workflow and productivity, processes that happen by walking around, handing out reports, marking up bills for review. Those things have to change. And the good news about that is there is so much software out there to facilitate this. And your firm may already have this software. You may just not be using the capabilities of it. Security and compliance. So security has been a huge challenge and concern of law firms already. But now, not only is it just as much of a concern, in fact, a lot of the bad guys have been taking advantage of COVID in their new phishing tactics, but security and compliance are even more of a concern because you've now got a few dozen or a few hundred workers physically or geographically dispersed, and you still need to make sure that everything they're doing is secure and compliant, because you don't count on your big financial clients relaxing their audit requests with you just because we're in COVID times. BYOD, bring your own device, has got to be a big concern for law firms. When you've got people working remotely, what are they connecting from? Is it their computer or a firm computer? Whose internet connection are they using? And again, how is all that going to be supported?
Boris, we have a question, and I know a couple of people on this panel feel passionately about this.
Okay.
What do you recommend? And this is why you make the big bucks, Morris. Okay, what do you recommend? Bring your own device?
Don't tell my wife that.
Or is it company issued hardware and software, or hardware?
My answer to that, Ori, is, unfortunately, my answer is what everybody's predicting, is that it depends, but it depends on, I'll tell you the reason it depends. It depends because it has to work with the rest of your cloud setup. IT, each piece of IT doesn't operate in a silo. Everything has to work harmoniously. So for example, I'll give a little sneak preview. Desktop as a service is where things are going. It's not a prediction anymore, it's a reality. We're huge proponents of desktop as a service. In a desktop as a service model, the device matters less for many reasons, and I'll try to cover all of that. But it really depends. If you're a firm where you've got individual cloud-based tools, you've got Office 365 for email, you've got a web-based time and billing system, a web-based document management platform, in those cases, the firm needs to be issuing that hardware and the firm needs to be securing that hardware. Because
John?
users are...
I'm sorry, John, how do you feel about this?
I think, damn it, the firm must own the hardware and software so we can monitor it and regulate it and apply metrics to it. Don't want some kid logging in, when the employee failed to log out.
I don't disagree with you.
Things can happen.
But we've got to keep in mind that when the firm owns everything, the firm is responsible to support it. So now you've got help desk calls coming in for people who, if the firm owns the computer, was the firm going to give me a desk? Because I don't have room at home for the firm computer and my own computer. And does the firm computer work with my cable modem or my internet at home. I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is it brings up so many new challenges.
Sherry, what do you think about who owns, if we've got remote employees or firm owners?
Our company 3 years ago went from you could use your own to absolutely 100% mandated that we had to. And I got to tell you, for security reasons, and I can't imagine that some people's clients are going to allow that type of thing to occur. Just IT security of documents flowing, and as you said, how do you control who's going to access it? Yeah, there's some logistical issues and potential additional costs with help desks and all those aspects of it. But if this world is not getting less remote and less technology oriented, it's getting more. So you're going to have to control it. And I will tell you that the firms that do own all of their own equipment, they have been able to test productivity. So instead of guessing what your productivity is, firms are actually able to go and see how long they're logged on, what they're doing, what their billable hours are, and that goes all the way from staff all the way up. And it is yet another tool and vehicle to be able to.
Sherry, you're right.
Sherry, aren't we blocking
But I'm gonna,
Facebook and blocking Amazon and blocking all the distractions?
John, I'm going to address both you and Sherry. You're both right in theory. Unfortunately, most of our firms don't operate in theory. We operate in the real world. And what I will say, and especially for the smaller firms, providing firm-owned technology to everybody is not cheap. What I will say is that desktop as a service actually allows for both of the best of both worlds. It's all about isolation and creating that Chinese wall and ensuring that all of the firm data is kept secure. Now, you can keep it secure on 100 random laptops that are owned by the firm but are geographically dispersed, or you can keep it all secure in the cloud. And John, if you could forward to the next slide.
Absolutely. And we've got a slew of questions coming in. I want to make sure we have some time to get to some of them.
I will try to move. I'll try to plow through this. So first of all, before I think we're missing a word up here. It must have gotten lost in the email. What should law firms be looking to cloud for? So I'm going to just go out there and say it. Moving to the cloud has traditionally been, law firms are, like you've said, resistant to change. So having that discussion with a law firm of why they should move to the cloud typically required a catalyst, such as an office relocation, or their servers were going end of life, or Windows 7 was going away, and that was a good reason to move cloud. In every previous disaster, again, well, 9/11 was a little pre-cloud, but Sandy, Hurricane Harvey, all of these events, cloud was the obvious solution. And I think with what's going on now, I know the discussions have gone from why should we move to cloud to how can we move to cloud and what can we move to cloud. So email is the first and obvious one. Most firms probably already are doing that. That's sort of table stakes. File sharing. A lot of firms are doing file sharing with clients through something like a Citrix share file, but there are many solutions to allow internal file sharing to be in the cloud. And please don't go Dropbox. If anybody is talking about or is using Dropbox, we need to have a serious discussion about that. Collaboration, like I mentioned, there's all these $1 million systems from Cisco out there to allow collaboration and video conferencing, but you know what? The cloud ones work much better. VoIP systems, which were previously a nice to have for a law firm, became essential because firms don't want to give out everybody's cell phone numbers. Lawyers don't want to call back from their cell phones sometimes. So being able to be reachable at home at your office extension to dial people, to see who's on the phone, just like you were in the office, have become critical. Now, application software. So I want to clear something up. A lot of people think that moving to the cloud means changing your software and moving from a ProLaw or a Coyote or an Adderant over to something like a Clio. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. In fact, most web-based software packages, unfortunately, still don't hold a candle to their traditional counterparts. And when I say traditional, I mean the things that used to come on a CD in a box, but I mean the things that go on a server and a desktop. Application software can go to the cloud in many ways, but it's got to. At this point, if somebody has systems that are not cloud-based, the remote access to them is probably not that great, and that speaks to the lack or loss in productivity. And last but not least, I mentioned earlier, desktop as a service, which is also, it's sort of called cloud's best kept secret. And full disclosure, this is something that we live and breathe and we're huge proponents of. And like the Hair Club for Men, I'm not just, not just the president.
Hey, watch it, Tabish, watch it.
I'm one of,
Watch it.
okay, I'm part of the community, but we believe in it and we use it ourselves. Having entire desktop computers in the cloud, I'll just say this, from our clients who have it, they're using words these last few months, they're using phrases like godsend and lifesaver. It's allowed them to literally transport their people seamlessly and have that exact same experience wherever they are, with full security, well, the employees aren't happy about it, but with the firm still monitoring what people are doing, everything staying secure, everything still staying compliant, and not worrying about what their return to office is going to look like, because they're part of that crew that says return, we'll wait and see. We're in no rush. So again, it's gone from why should we go to cloud to how can we and what can we put in the cloud. And those old days of having a server room and this is what we have and this is how you work. And when you're out of the office, we've got these other systems for you. Those are long.
We've heard it, Morris, again and again in our roundtables. Uri and I do these managing partner conference calls all the time about, thank goodness we had moved to the cloud before S hit the fan. We remarkably adjusted, and it's interesting to see some of our old school lawyers figuring out they can be a little more self-supportive, and they can actually print documents and use Zoom and are having fun with it. And so it can be done, but the lawyer personality, we've talked about it again and again. Larry Richard really drills down on the resistance to change, the risk aversion,
but when
all
it's
these
done
good
right,
things that are embedded within
what I'll say, John, is that when it's done right, people don't know that there's a change.
Right.
When cloud is done right, it feels like they just got a new computer. So your icons are in different spots and your background is different, but it looks the same.
I find it's a little slower from time to time. We went to the cloud about 1.5 years ago, but it's a little slower to save documents, retrieve documents.
Not if it's done right. And again, there's so many ways to go to the cloud, but when it's done right, it performs faster, or as fast or faster than the best PCs out there today. And I've been doing it for 8 weeks.
I'm my IT guy because I like it. The benefits far outweigh having the old servers here in the office, but it's definitely the way to go.
The old servers are a thing of the past. Look, there's a little bit of real estate savings there also, but it's mainly about the flexibility. And like Sherry said, millennials are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the workforce. And millennials, even prior to this, they don't want to be told that they have to work from this desk every day. But the firm and the CEO, the firm's operations people say, well, wait a minute, you've got to be compliant, you've got to be secure, you've got to do things a certain way. So it's about finding the right balance and utilizing cloud in the right way. Again, just because your firm moved to Office 365 a few years ago, that's great, but you're not in the cloud just yet. And
Morris, thank you. And now, Uri, I'm going to kick to you to mine through some of the questions we've received from our audience. Thank you for those who contributed.
Yes, we've got a whole bunch of.
Gary, thank you, Morris. And now we'll chat a little bit about among ourselves and entertain some questions. So, Uri, why don't you take
Sure.
us
So we have a couple of questions just that's come up. First of all, the slides John did mention will be sent, as well as the recording, John?
Yes. Yes, we will. You will get a link to the recorded version of this, as well as a nice set of handout materials by the end of the day. So I'll be on the lookout for that.
Someone just asked Sherry, what did you say the average square footage was? I thought I heard 800. Is that?
The average current square feet per attorney is in the low 8s, 810, and at occupancy, however, it's in the low 6s. With an average 14% vacancy rates. All these numbers are driving down. And keep in mind, that's where people sit today. When they're out looking in the market, their target ratio is to get below 600 square feet per attorney. I think COVID and currently is probably going to drive that below 5.
Thank you, Sherry. We had done at our event last week in New York, at John and I's event, we shared the data that in New York City region, the smaller firms were at the 650 range, which you won't be surprised. In the most expensive markets around the country, those square footage are going to be lower, and that's really interesting. Okay, so we have other questions. Telework policies. Everybody had a policy until March 2020. Do they have new policies now? Morris, Sherry?
Well, what we're seeing is the policy is everyone's doing it. The biggest challenge we've seen from firms is productivity monitoring. And, you know,
Okay.
we talk about there's 1,000,001 applications out there to monitor things like keystrokes and what applications and what windows were open on somebody's screen. But and we've deployed lots of those, but in my opinion, those only monitor input. And the successful firms that we work with are the ones who monitor output, the ones who are saying, we don't really know what time people work. We don't really care what time they work or if they take a few minute break to browse Facebook, because everybody has their metrics and their goals of what they need to hit, whether they're an attorney or a paralegal or support staff, they have their weekly goals. And one of our clients, about an 80-person law firm who's been doing that, and they said, it's working out great for us. They don't waste the time monitoring how long people take to do each task. They monitor the output, not the input.
Yeah, John, we heard from a lot, Sherry, just 1 second. We heard from a lot of people, John, that they're monitoring their lawyers, right? Easy, billable hours.
Yes.
Come to staff.
We already have metrics on the lawyers. It's the support staff having trouble keeping an eye on. And, you know, they got more distractions at home, typically in a smaller working space and haven't been set up to work remotely. You know, we had a question here. I'm looking through our questions, Morris, and it does prompt our last polling question. I meant Uri, I'm sorry, where it's asking about, will we need fewer employees coming out of this to support our lawyers? So I'm going to throw that. Everybody loves the benchmarking data. I'm going to throw that out as a polling question. If I can find my polling questions, where did they go? You can tell. So this will be our last question for the audience, which is, what do you project will be your need for support staff as we come out of this? Lawyers becoming more tech savvy, a bit more self-supporting, working at home. Do we need as many legal assistants and paralegals and back office support staff to support their productivity? And Uri, you haven't yet done a guess what our audience will tell us, but what do you think our answer might be to this question?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be somewhat less or about the same. I'm not sure people are cutting back or ready to cut back so much yet. Somewhat less or about the same. 3,
2, 1, and we will share these polling results. That was one of our questions. And here, you were spot on, very good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Spot on.
I didn't have a preview. I did not have a preview.
Well, people have to trust us on that, Uri, and you know, no, he didn't, I can assure. But thank you.
One of the things,
I
John,
think this proves out just the responses of these. This is a balancing game. It's going to be shifting funds and revenue to different categories and buckets of need. It's going to be reevaluating every single one of your clients, your employees, your attorneys, and every firm is going to pick and choose and move around what's best for them. But one thing is for sure, you all just acknowledged the change is ahead of us and it's significant.
But I'm going to comment also, while I agree that there will eventually be a less of a need for support staff.
I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Is that me?
I don't know. I've been trying to mute folks, and
What I will say, I'll be brief then. This change of less support staff is not going to happen automatically. It's the systems and the technology and the processes that are going to eliminate some, that are going to allow the lawyers to be more self-sufficient. And it's also the change in culture. Lawyers will start to have to put paper in the printers by themselves. We're not going to have support staff to do that.
I have to learn how to print a PDF. I could share a bunch of stories, and I'm looking at our clock here, and boy, does an hour fly by when you got smart people talking about interesting topics and an engaged audience. We maxed out at about 160 participants today, and so thank you to those of you who did participate. I just want to close out a bit. First, thanks, Sherry. Thank Morris.
Pleasure.
Both
John
of
and
them
Uri.
are happy to chat with you and continue the conversation offline. I'll share their contact information at the close. You know, as we look forward, the old bricks and mortar model where people have to come in, and we're keeping an eye on the parking lot, and the partners have big corner offices, and we've got a library. Those things went away a while back, but are we going to go back to bricks and mortar? Some firms are dying to get back, others not. There's no one size fits all here, but think strategically, think deliberately, be proactive in what we're going to do coming out of this. You might go and become a virtual firm. Those firms are out there. Fisher Broyles, we had the managing partner at that firm speak at our conference, and they were building a 100% virtual law firm about 4 or 5 years ago, and really ahead of the curve. Everybody was watching them, and guess what? It's a model that's very, very successful for that particular law firm. That might be your firm in 10 years, or maybe some hybrid where we maintain offices, conference rooms, maybe visiting attorney offices. Sherry, you like to use the term hoteling, where you don't have a designated office, but when you come in, we'll assign you a visiting attorney office. Your primary office is back home. So all sorts of continuums. Can we accommodate lawyers working remotely? Can we accommodate lawyers and support staff who want to come in to the office because that's where they're most productive? That's where they want to be. And how are we going to preserve our collegiality, our culture, our collaboration, our training for our young lawyers if they're not here with us every day? It'll be interesting to see how firms move through this and evolve from it. But as we've noted here, change is all around us, whether we like it or not. Some firms will adapt and seize the day, others not so much. This is guidance we've been dispensing managing partners throughout our web seminar series. It still applies. Care about your people. I did add a third bullet point. Think strategically. Think big picture, long term, at what your firm's going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. Going back to normal or the way things used to be probably isn't the right direction. Here are our resources. We've availed these webinars every other Wednesday. Hopefully we'll pull off our leadership conference in the fall, and we're going forth, but we'll be making a firm decision mid-August where we're going to go with that. Here's our contact information. Uri, Sherry, let me ask you, any closing comments for the good of the order?
Sure. John, I'll just reiterate what you just
I
said.
was talking to Sherry.
Ladies
You'll
first.
get your shot in a minute. Sherry, ladies first.
I'll let Morris go first, and
Okay.
I'll go last.
So what I'll just close with this. You all owe it to your firms and to yourselves and to your firms to open your eyes a bit wider. You know, now is not the time to say we've always done it a certain way and we're going to continue down that path. This is the time to rethink things and again think of how are we going to come out of this stronger. I believe we all will, but that's not just going to happen on its own. So this is the time to rethink things and to ask the tough questions to your IT people, and don't just accept their, oh, we just don't believe in that. That's ask the tough questions. That's your job as managing partners.
Absolutely. And Sherry, now it's your turn. You were so nice to defer to Morris.
Sure. Utilize the rest of this year to beta test some concepts and ideas. Really reach out, do surveys with your people, with your lawyers, find out what they're really thinking, and appreciate that people can change in a way that maybe you never thought of before. Embrace this opportunity because it truly can allow you to reinvent yourself. The only obstacle you're going to have is yourself.
Thank you, Sherry. And Uri, last but certainly not least.
Thank you, John. I mean, I'm struck by, we've been talking for the last couple of years about making your firm into the platform of choice, where successful laterals want to join your firm. That was often making the presentation to the lateral that we're going to be a firm, because let's face it, those who are successful in bringing in business, they had the pick of the firm and they would pick of any firm they wanted. So you had to market your firm as the platform that people wanted to. And generally, that was, we have business development strategies, we have practice groups. That's changed. And I think people have to start thinking like we've talked about today, which is when a lateral comes to your firm, they're going to want to know different questions now. How do you collaborate in the new world? What's your technology like? And I would just caution, don't wait for losing a lateral for that same reason. Don't wait to lose a client or one of your existing partners. That's the new barometer for success.
And lean forward to tomorrow's lawyers and how they want to practice law and operate a law firm, as opposed to the seniors who are moving toward the sunsets of their careers. We often encourage managing partners to tune into your younger partners. They're your future, and build a place where they want to come and thrive and stay for a while. Sherry, thank you so much. Morris, you as well.
Thank you.
Great to be with
Thank you, John. Thank
really
you,
appreciate your participation. And ladies and gentlemen who joined us, we'll be following up. Please feel free, here are the phone numbers, email addresses for all of us. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to carry the conversation further. Thanks for joining our Managing Partner webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about firm culture and how to retain a culture, build a culture for tomorrow's law firm. And Terry Eisner will be leading us in that conversation. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And hopefully we'll see you in person soon. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye, all.